Welcome to the Atlantic Current. I'm Vince Martin from Wall Street in Maine, here as always with Tull McAdoo from the Irish Politics newsletter. We've got a lot to talk about this week. We're going to have more on the war in Iran, of course, along with a major, yet somehow undercovered development in American politics. But first, St. Patrick's Day is coming up, so we're going to start our focus in Ireland, Tull. A couple big pieces of news from the left, I guess you could say, in your fine country, right?
Hello, listeners. Welcome to the show. And yes, Catherine Connolly, our far-left firebrand president, has got the government's hackles up in recent days. Last Sunday, she condemned the violations of international law in the Gulf. Now, she wasn't talking about the Gulf of Mexico.
Excuse me, it's the Gulf of America now.
Sorry about that. Or the St. Lawrence Gulf, or, take your pick of any Gulfs around the world. She was talking about only one Gulf in particular. And she was also alluding to only two countries in particular, and that was the United States and Israel. And she said they were shocking and numbing, and she said we can't afford inaction. Now, I'm not sure what action she'd like Ireland to take. I don't know, would she like us to send some, Girl Scouts or Boy Scouts, or, send over some politicians to do some finger wagging or the like. She never specified, but this is a problem because constitutionally in Ireland, as we've spoken before, the president does not stray into foreign affairs. In fact, as we've said before, the president does not have much power to do anything. So the government is starting to feel a little bit uneasy about this, Vincent. And can you guess why they might start to feel a little bit uneasy about this?
One guess would be the timing's got to be just awful, right?
Bingo, my friend. Yeah. Take a shot of whiskey. And her timing in particular, as Micheál Martin or Taoiseach or Prime Minister, he's going to the White House. He's going to walk a tightrope between humouring Trump and not enraging everybody back home.
Right.
It's the kind of high trapeze act that you see a fella, walking between two buildings in, Kuala Lumpur or something like that.
Even by politician standards, that's a tough one, right? Being a politician is basically trying to navigate two camps without pissing one or the other off. This is like the reality show finale level of tests.
Yes, of course. And imagine you're walking this tightrope and there's a flock of fire-breathing dragons encircling you. And this is what Catherine Connolly's up to. Well, people are saying, is Catherine Connolly being left-wing and she's been a firebrand and she's been herself. Typical lefty, typical far lefty, doesn't care about jobs, doesn't care about the economy. But I think she knows exactly what she's doing. Considering she's a barrister, so she's trained in the Constitution, so she knows the constitutional role of the President of Ireland. And there's been a lot of theorising about what's going on here. I have a theory here, Vince, that Catherine Connolly is doing this deliberately to undermine the government. And it's going to be a long-term strategy that she's going to try to undermine the government at every chance she gets. She's going to be a thorn in their side. And right now, Trump is the thorn in her side, and she's twisting that thorn into them.
That was our second episode. We covered the presidential election, which she had just won. You were saying that was kind of a concern at the time, right? That she might be a departure from the traditional role, which, as you point out, is largely ceremonial.
So I don't think she's going to make things easy for the government. I think poor old Micheál Martin is in a terribly tricky decision, but I thought it was notable that the government came down and slapped her down so publicly. It was a very public, dressing down, which didn't really happen under Michael D. Higgins, our previous president. The government were quite happy to let him, shoot his mouth off and be generally harmless.
Well, he looked harmless too.
He did well. He's like a big teddy bear.
Yeah.
Though she didn't mention the United States by name, obviously, but her words are taken as a clear message that she believes strongly that the Irish government should be speaking out against is what Israel and what the United States are doing in Iran at the moment, and a week before he goes to visit Trump in the White House, which, depending on what way Trump gets out of the bed in the morning, could blow up in Ireland's face spectacularly. I think the government were just reminding her of her role constitutionally. And I suppose by implication, they're saying that, get back in your box and stay there. We'll see where she goes with this, which leads me into one of her major supporters, Sinn Fein. Now, I sent you an article. Did you have a look at it?
I did, yeah.
And as an American, let me ask you this. What did you make of it from the outset?
That's a great question. So basically, Cantor Fitzgerald, which is a financial services firm in New York, had plans to move operations to Belfast, creating up to 300 jobs. They had a meeting, which apparently was not a long meeting, right, with a representative from Sinn Fein. And they were like, this, we're out, project's off. The funny thing is, like, I'm kind of not really sure what to make of it, because I think you could tell two stories. You could tell one story that the decision to call off the project was driven by Sinn Fein, and you could tell another one where it was more likely driven by Cantor itself. If you're not familiar, Cantor was run for a long time by Howard Lutnick, who is now Trump's Commerce Secretary. The two co-chief executive officers of the firm now are Lutnick's two sons. So you can have your story that, Sinn Fein's stance on Israel probably insulted Lutnick, who's part of the administration, his sons who are quite pro-Israel. But you could also have another, which is that maybe somebody in the administration said, our Commerce Secretary's firm shipping 300 jobs overseas is probably not a good idea.
That's a very honest assessment, Vincent, of the American side of things, especially coming from the inside the White House. You think that's actually probably maybe more plausible than what the article is suggesting? And let me say the article's in the Belfast Telegraph by Sam McBride, who's been a long time brilliant reporter on everything that goes on politically in Northern Ireland. He's a knack for really finding things that other people don't.
I'm really loath, for a number of reasons, to sort of say which one I believe.
Sinn Féin were trying to have their cake and eat it in terms of, we're really against the American administration, but we're happy to take your jobs.
Yeah.
And obviously somebody said to Lutnick, why are you shipping 300 jobs back to Ireland?
But the way the right-wing media machine works here, one of his rivals could have put out a story that Lutnick's firm is shipping 300 jobs overseas, not only overseas, but in consultation with the political party who have called Donald Trump whatever Sinn Féin has called Donald Trump. I'm sure it's not the greatest president in the history of the world, which is probably the only thing Trump would accept at this point.
It's funny that they were sending 300 jobs to Belfast when they already employed 215 people in Dublin. There's something not right there, something feels off. But it's been painted in the Republic of Ireland that Sinn Féin cannot be trusted on foreign affairs or the economy. And quite frankly, I agree with those sentiments, Vince. So I thought it was an interesting story, and I think it highlights Sinn Féin's hypocrisy in going with the begging bowl to the United States while wagging their finger at them at the same time. You cannot do that with this Trump administration. You just cannot do it. We've spoken at length about this, how, Trump makes enemies really easy. He likes to nurse a grudge. And he's going to see Sinn Féin for what they're at here.
Yeah.
You're looking for 300 high-paid jobs, but you're telling me I'm on my job?
Yeah.
Would you, if somebody came to you like that, what would you say?
Yeah, absolutely.
You tell them where to go.
Yeah.
So,
particularly because there are other options too.
I mean, Ireland has been, very civil to Trump. We have one of his golf courses here. Send those 300 jobs to Dublin. We look after you, Donald.
It may be that Belfast's role in the United Kingdom was, that was a lower cost option of accessing the London market than trying to find, 300 people in London proper, where I can't speak to that. I did try and understand exactly the details of that plan. It doesn't seem like they were released all that publicly beforehand. But in America, that idea of the hypocrisy on the left quite often is expressed. Al Gore was the classic example of that. He came out with that documentary, An Inconvenient Truth, about how America needed to answer global warming. And then, of course, he's flying all over the country on a private jet, giving speeches and going to premieres and stuff. And people are like, come on, man.
Yes, you're having your cake and eating it.
Yeah.
Yes, indeed.
Good work if you can get it, though.
Of course, yes. I will say this about Cantor Fitzgerald's Dublin office is it's highly profitable for very, very profitable. So
it has nothing to do with insider trading off.
No, it doesn't.
Under no circumstances could that possibly happen. Let's just make sure we're clear.
So about Lutnick and his boss, I've noticed a thing in the United States there recently, Vincent, and it's been whispered on social media, but it's in the background, it's in the undergrowth, and it says voter fraud. Voter fraud.
Yeah, you can't miss it on social media, certainly.
Do you want to give our European listeners the rundown there?
This is an issue that we've kind of alluded to a little bit in the past, but I do think even in America, it's underappreciated how much of Trump's base fervently believes that our elections are routinely, regularly rigged. So if you hear Trump going, oh, yeah, I won this election, the 2020 election was stolen, and you see January 6th, you might say, well, that's kind of a small portion, like the most of committed of his supporters. At this point, the Republican voting base just believes in all this stuff. And this year, the Republicans in Congress are trying to pass what's known as the SAVE Act. And this is ostensibly to combat voter fraud. The two key provisions are that it requires voter ID at elections nationwide, which is not currently a requirement coming from the federal level, and it requires proof of citizenship when you register to vote. I think to the right, it seems like a common sense thing because voter ID is pretty common around the world. Do you have to show ID to vote in Ireland?
Yeah, you do generally, and they'll have your name down at the register and stuff like that. If you bring your passport, driver's license, not fussy. If they actually know you to see, they'll be grand, vote away, it's fine.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, because states here constitutionally run the elections, the laws are different by states.
Let me stop you there for a moment there, Vincent.
Okay.
Tull here can rock on up from West Cork at American polling booth somewhere in, say, the Midwest, Iowa, take your pick, and vote for whoever I want in the presidential election without ID.
I'm not sure about Iowa in particular, but in North Carolina, they will ask you for a photo ID. And if you say, I don't have one, they'll say, that's fine. You have to fill out this form.
Okay.
So you could come to North Carolina and go vote as me. Yeah.
Right.
And again, so you're kind of proving the point. Like, that sounds weird. And if you're on Twitter/X, Elon has been posting about this for months now. And this is a common sense thing. Of course, you should have to show your ID to vote. You have to show your ID to buy booze or to get on a plane.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't you have to show ID to vote? So they see the fact that this act is not passing, that it's not getting past the Democratic filibuster for reasons we don't need to go into. This act right now needs 60 votes in the Senate. Republicans are not getting 60 votes.
How many votes do they have?
I think they have 50. There's 50 Republicans. As far as I know, I don't think any Democrats have announced that they would vote for it. But the Democrats do oppose this. There's two core arguments going on here. And the first is the cold, cynical, political argument, which I'm sure is near and dear to your heart, Tull, which is basically that if you put in photo ID, there are a lot of people in this country who don't actually have access to their ID or to, more importantly, to proof of citizenship to register to vote. Okay. I think it's only like half of Americans even have a passport. So if you don't have a paper copy of your birth certificate lying around, and we all lose those, I went years without having it, then you won't be allowed to register to vote. So the cold calculations, these people who are probably lower on the socioeconomic spectrum are more likely to vote Democrat.
Okay, yeah.
So if you're just a heartless Republican political consultant, you're pushing for this because you're going to have fewer people who will vote Democrat in all these elections. And if you're a Democratic strategist, you want these people voting because they're more likely to vote for you. One of the funny things is not entirely clear at this point whether that's true. Okay. Right? That's kind of the old stereotype. Rich people vote Republican and poor people vote Democrat. A lot of Democrats have made the joke that if you only allowed Americans who had passports to vote, it might actually be pretty good for the left.
Let me sum up the SAVE Act here. It's proposing to fix a kind of imaginary crisis with some bureaucracy, is it?
Again, Republicans don't think it's imaginary. They think all these elections are rigged. They're going to your point that, hey, Tull McAdoo can just fly across the ocean and walk into a North Carolina polling station and have his vote for president recorded. Isn't that a problem? Don't we need to do something about that?
Well, luckily for the United States, Tull wouldn't be voting for Kamala Harris or Donald Trump, to be perfectly honest. Now, can I ask you, this is purely for our European listeners in how many European countries at the moment, but why do 50% of Americans do not have a passport? Is that 50% of Americans have not left the country or had no need or whatever?
Yeah, that number jumps out to you, huh? One thing I would say is, of the 50% of people don't have passports, maybe someone who had one and it's expired, things like that. It doesn't show that 50% of Americans have never left the country.
Right.
But it does show that 50% of Americans don't plan to do it anytime soon. Does that number seem high to you?
Well, it seems high for an OECD country, yes.
Yeah.
It seems quite high. I say this as an Irish person from an Irish point of view, where Ryanair revolutionised air travel across Europe. It's more expensive to get the train from Dublin to Cork on some weekends, depending, than it is to fly from Ryanair to London or Copenhagen. So everybody's a passport because everybody goes on these really cheap European holidays.
It's different here. It's more expensive, and it's just more of a production. There really aren't any short haul international flights here. But yeah, I mean, a lot of Americans have never left the country. I didn't leave the country till I was 35, except for I spent 20 hours doing a gig in Toronto. That was the extent of my international travel until then.
I'm sure that's not abroad.
No, I don't think that counts. Toronto's so American, they film movies set in America there. So,
is the issue here a states' rights versus a federal rights thing? It's a battle between the states and the government and who has control of information.
There's a little bit of that. There's some constitutional worries about it. But at its heart, I think that this is a battle between Republicans who believe that elections are rigged and the rest of us who believe that they're not. And I do think it's underappreciated how existential Trump's base views this bill as, because if you believe Donald Trump that the 2020 election was rigged, he's also said the 2016 election was rigged, then there's no reason why this bill does not get passed. There's no reason why Republicans don't, for instance, get rid of the filibuster, which is a big part of this. There's absolutely no reason for any of that to happen because this is an existential threat. If you don't pass this in response to all that, then you're basically saying that elections are just going to be rigged forever.
Right.
And that's why they want to get rid of the filibuster. Now, there's a lot of Republicans who are making the very wise point that if you get rid of the filibuster, which requires 60 votes for a lot of major things, the day Democrats get in office and they control the Senate, they are coming right back for you, man. And of course they are.
Can I ask you, has there been any nonpartisan polling on how popular this has been?
It actually is pretty popular if you ask people about it. Yeah, I mean, I think the polling is it's in like the low 60s, I think.
That's pretty high.
Yeah.
That's pretty high nonpartisan polling, yeah.
That's more grist for the Republican mill online, particularly. 60% of Americans support this. You need an ID to go buy alcohol or get on a plane. Most countries in Europe have voter ID. So if you come to it from that perspective, the only possible reason why this doesn't get passed, why Democrats don't want this to get passed, is because they want to rig elections, because they are importing immigrants who are all going to vote illegally and all these sorts of things. And it does poll well because the common sense argument for it is pretty simple.
So when I hear politicians talking about common sense arguments, I suspect very strongly that they've done polling on it secretly and they're only bringing it to light now, bringing the issue to light.
Yeah.
To be perfectly honest, I wouldn't be one for coming down on the side of Republicans, but it does seem like a common sense thing. And I'm a lily-livered communist European, Vince, and I think this is actually quite common sense as well. It's quite sensible.
Here's my response to that. I actually don't, and I think I think it's silly. And the biggest reason is that it is a solution in search of a problem that does not exist. And the irony is all these Republicans who are saying elections are rigged, their theories about 2020, for instance, don't have anything to do with voter ID. They're not alleging that there were buses of illegal immigrants going to, polling stations in Georgia. Their arguments are that all the stuff was happening after the votes were recorded and behind the scenes. But if you just think about the mechanics of it, again, you said you could go to a North Carolina polling place and say you're Vince Martin and record a vote. Why? Why are you doing that? Especially at the federal level. I mean, I read an article recently, and I assume this is correct, that a TD, a member of the Irish Dáil Parliament, represents 30,000 people.
Yeah.
On average?
Thereabouts,
okay.
Yeah.
A member of the U.S. House of Representatives represents 600,000. These elections have 300,000, 350,000 votes in them regularly. So you're going to take a risk of being charged with a felony. If you're an illegal immigrant, you're going to walk into a voting precinct that's got, government officials and maybe even a police officer in there. You're just going to wander in and commit this crime to cast one vote of 350,000? It's insane.
It's a lot of effort, is what you're saying. It's a lot of effort.
There are cases of illegal in-person voting. They pop up from time to time. They're almost always some kind of mistake. Often it's somebody who was convicted of a felony and didn't know that removed their voting rights or things like that. But this is just insane. And it actually is a hardship for some people. If you have ever lived kind of that way, or people who are in their 70s or 80s and who don't have IDs, lost an ID or whatever it is, it's time and money getting a copy of your birth certificate is time and money. There are people for whom paying $35 or $55 or whatever the state fee is to do that, or going to a state office from 9 to 5 on Monday to Friday when they're working poor or whatever. Like, this is not imaginary when people on the left say, oh, this is a hardship for people. It is. If you're really at the bottom, this is a hardship. And it is just, again, the whole thing is this problem is imaginary. We have no evidence of it. And I've had this argument with people, and I say, look, if you think this is a problem, just tell me hypothetically. Hypothetically, how does an election where 350,000 people vote get affected by illegal in-person voting? And if you walk, and the other thing too, like people go, oh, well, you can just walk in. But you can walk in, but they're also going to mark down that you walked in and voted. So when Vince Martin actually does come in 2 hours later and goes in, it's going to be on the registry that I already voted, and someone's going to notice and pay attention. Like, it's not, like, there is just no world where this matters.
But there's probably security cameras in these places as well.
I'm sure, yeah. I mean, obviously not in the voting booth, but, Trump's probably working on that. Well, him and Palantir are going to put cameras in all the booths and have AI do the vote counting.
Which would bring us to my voter fraud story. We had an incident of voter fraud. This is a really mad story, Vincent. I'm not joking. It's the most Irish story ever. So
I'm sure it'll be fun.
Right, Vincent, okay. I'm persuaded. You've persuaded me, and I actually agree with you. One vote out of 600,000 isn't making much of a difference. But as you said, in Ireland, it's one vote per 30,000 people. After the 2024 general election, we had a Senator Mike Connolly get up in our higher parliament, or so-called higher parliament anyway, and made some very strange allegations. So the background to this is some fella called David Moriarty from Carrick-Savine, County Kerry, pleaded guilty to fraudulently casting a ballot paper under Section 138 of the Election Act. He avoided a criminal conviction because the judge, being a nice guy, was probably a Friday afternoon, wanted to get out of town. And he was ordered to pay €1,000 to charity. The court heard that the polling card that our intrepid voter David Moriarty used had gone missing from a tractor. Okay? Are you following me here?
I think so.
Guy robs a voting card from a tractor. That's where it was, right? The voting card belonged to somebody else. Your man just took his card, went off and voted under somebody else's name, and he was caught. Now, his solicitor, Brendan O'Hearn, said his client was at a low ebb at the time because his relationship broke down and clouded his judgment. Now, Vince, we have all been there, right?
We've been
there. I've been there plenty of times. I've 18 years of age, relationship falls apart, I'm a million miles away from home, and you know what I'm going to do? I'm not going to take to the beer. I'm not going to take to the Class A drugs. I'm going to go off and vote in somebody else's name. That's what I'm going to do. We've all been there. My heart goes out to this man. We've all been at such a low ebb that we've committed voter fraud.
Yeah, there's a couple country songs about that, I think. Yeah.
Yes, there is. Now, here's where it gets spicy. We have a thing called Oireachtas privilege. I don't know if you've heard about that, but basically, the long and short of it is you can get up in our Houses of Parliament and say what you like about anybody and you're protected by law.
We have a version of that here, yeah.
Okay. So, Fine Gael Senator Mike Connolly, he spoke under Oireachtas privilege in the Seanad and made some very strenuous claims. He said Moriarty, the guy, the voter, he works for the Healy Rays, the famous Kerry political dynasty, a fact that was mysteriously absent in court, our senator pointed out. And apparently nobody within the legal profession or the Gardaí or police service asked who put you up to it.
Huh.
They took him at face value that he was so heartbroken that he went off and committed voter fraud. So that's our own very most recent case of voter fraud. It's the kind of thing from a John B. Keane play that why did he do it? He was heartbroken. That just doesn't add up. It's a great conspiracy theory, and it's been doing the rounds in Ireland for a while now. But that is Ireland's only case of voter fraud in recent years. It's not quite at the level of the United States,
right?
But it happens all over the world.
Yeah, I mean, we have like a couple dozen cases a year, as I understand it, kind of nationally. These random things. Yeah, there are kind of weird things, and we have had
broken.
Yeah, Yeah, I don't think any of them have tried to use that defense, but evidently they should try. One of the more interesting ones actually happened in North Carolina in 2019. There was a race for the U.S. House of Representatives that the state refused to certify and required a new election because of organized voter fraud by one of the candidates using absentee ballots. They were basically harvesting absentee ballots in kind of a rural constituency and then filling them out themselves and mailing them in. The funny thing in the context of this discussion is that, as a lot of listeners may be guessing, that was committed by the Republican campaign. The Republican candidate himself is not charged, but one of his campaign workers was.
Was he elected anyway?
When they held the new election, that Republican dropped out.
Okay.
They put in another Republican. He won. Then that Republican served 3 terms. And in 2024, the guy named Mark Harris, who had originally run in 2018 and benefited from the fraudulent votes, he ran again and actually did win. He is now in the U.S. House of Representatives, despite charges of electoral fraud. I did not look to see where he voted on the SAVE Act. I'm going to bet you about $1 million, having not done that he voted for it, which I think gives you a little bit of a sense of the underlying hypocrisy here. But I mean, we and there are old stories. Chicago has always been famous for having a machine. There was a big scandal there in the 80s. There's still allegations that Chicago threw the 1960 presidential election to our man John F. Kennedy over
Tammany Hall is the famous one as well.
Tammany Hall in New York. I mean, they did that. But in the modern period, the way that these things are set up, again, we just don't have any evidence of it. But Trump has been pushing this going back to the 2016 primaries. He accused Ted Cruz of rigging state primaries as they were fighting for the Republican nomination. And then the end of 2016, the general election, he started up with, it's all rigged. And everyone believed then and still believes that he was doing that because he thought he was going to lose. And then he wound up winning. Then he went out and he said, yeah, it was rigged. There was 3 million illegal votes. And everyone was like, what evidence do you have for that? And of course, the evidence was he lost a popular vote by 3 million.
3 million, yeah.
So, yeah. And they put in a commission in 2017. It lasted like a few months. So he's been pushing this for a long time. And again, there's just no evidence. And particularly with the in-person stuff, there's no logic. No one's taking that risk for that reward unless they're brokenhearted or just flat weird, I think.
Yeah. An outbreak of heartbroken men in the United States voting illegally. Yes, that's what it is. A plague.
Yeah, we need the U.S. Senate involved in that. But where I think this matters, like internationally, to be honest, is I've mentioned this before, but we are just absolutely whistling past the graveyard when it comes to November midterms. Trump got routed in 2018. The Republicans lost 40 seats in the House.
Yeah.
All the prediction markets are saying that the Democrats can take the House back. The idea that particularly with this SAVE Act getting all this coverage and riving up the base and all the things he said since, the idea that he's going to do what he did in 2018 and just not say anything is nuts. We are really at risk of the feds trying to take over the elections beforehand, trying to drive recounts after. We have the risk of Democrats who win election not being seated in January because Trump won't seat them or because there's so many lawsuits. We are headed towards an absolute nightmare. And the Republicans who ostensibly could, particularly in the Senate, who could stand up against this a little bit and who did, like in 2021, say, no, Trump's making this stuff up. The elections are fine. No one stole it. They're oddly quiet, and they have to be because they're going to be primaried. There's a runoff in Texas for the Republican nomination there, and the incumbent just flipped. He was against removing the filibuster for the SAVE Act, and he just flipped because if he doesn't flip, he's going to lose. People are badly underestimating how much danger this country is in right now. November is going to be really nasty, really ugly. And if you're kind of that, America's in the Civil War position, which you've mentioned before, that's an event to keep an eye on.
When you say people are underestimating it badly, Vince, who are the people you're talking about?
I mean, I think politicians, I think people in the media. You have people in the media writing, once the Democrats win the House in November, that's going to affect Trump's policymaking and things like that. Well, that's not them winning the election in November is not the step that we're really, discussing here. They're acting as if it's just a foregone conclusion that American institutions are going to work. That if Democrats win the most seats in November, they're going to be sad in January and everything's going to work normally. I mean, we did that whole January 6th episode.
Yeah.
I don't understand how anybody thinks that Trump is going to react differently this time around. The difference being that he's going to be president of the United States.
With more power, more firepower, more legal power.
Yeah. And a Republican Party that somehow, I mean, you wouldn't think it's possible, but that is even more cowed by him and more obsequious to him and has shown absolutely no willingness to stand up to him in a way that they did do a little bit after January 6th. For 2 weeks anyways.
Cowards to a man.
I think so, yeah.
And as seen by recent events in Iran, the Democratic Party has been largely ineffectual in standing up to Trump also. An autocratic, powerful president versus an inept opposition is a lethal combination.
I don't think people are quite understanding how Republican voters are going to act in November. They wake up and are told that the Democrats took control of the House of Representatives without this act being passed, without significant action beforehand. They are all just going to believe that this was rigged. And it's just really hard to run a democratic government this way. Again, I'm self-centered and I'm American and I'm looking at home. But to me, Trump's 10-year campaign to basically destroy public faith in our elections, I think is the biggest piece of damage he's wrought. And his election denying has always been a red line for me. And I'm surprised that more people, even people I know, I'm surprised that's not the case for them.
You see, there's echoes, and I made comparisons like this in the past, and some have said they're frivolous, some said, that they're overblown. But the fact of the matter remains, there's a lot of hallmarks of the Weimar Republic in pre-World War II Germany with the United States at the moment. And if the economy goes bang, because of a world recession induced by Trump's antics in the Middle East, I think those similarities are only going to grow.
Yeah.
So we've a president smashing around the Middle East. The stuff with Iran is not going away for the simple reason Iran are not going to give up. They're one absolute ace in the hole, as you say, in the United States, and that's closing down those straits.
The new supreme leader just came out, I believe this morning or yesterday, and said, yeah, we're not going anywhere, and we are committed to keeping the Strait of Hormuz closed. Yep.
Oil prices have surged as Khamenei the Younger, as I call him, I'll get cancelled for that by Iran, saying that, we're going to close the straits. There's nothing really you can do about it. All Iran has to do, essentially, is find some mechanisms of keeping the strait closed. Right? It doesn't have to be high-tech. It doesn't have to be, $1 million bombs like the United States have been dropping on them. As long as he keeps it closed, they're winning.
This is what people were worried about with Iran when this started. But there's a famous exchange during the final negotiations between the U.S. and North Vietnam as we were leaving there. And a U.S. military commander said to his counterpart from North Vietnam, he said, you guys never defeated us on the battlefield. And the North Vietnamese man, if I'm remembering the story correctly, he said, yeah, but we didn't have to.
Yeah.
Tie goes to the home team here. So basically, it's just going to be how patient is Trump. When he runs out of patience, he's just going to take whatever deal he can get, and he's going to say, as he always does, it was the greatest deal ever and a result of his brilliant negotiating strategy, and enough of his base will go along, and that'll be that. But when that point is, it's hard to tell.
And I've seen reports that holiday destinations, tourist destinations, actually, the number one expat location in the world, Dubai, has been jailing people for sharing images of rocket attacks from Iran. So as Trump keeps bombing Iran, and Iran keeps closing the strait and launching drone attacks and missile attacks on Dubai and Abu Dhabi and Oman and the likes, it's highlighted actually the Middle East is not a very safe place no matter where you are.
Right.
And there's an exodus from Dubai at the moment. It's going to be very hard for the likes of Abu Dhabi and Dubai and Muscat, Riyadh, other countries in the Middle East to be perceived as very safe, very open to tourism, very open to business. The straits open in the morning, they're going to struggle to get that image back. I don't think there's any going back from that either at the moment. So
it's been interesting to hear your stories about Dubai and like that kind of Irish influencers and all that. But that region just doesn't have any kind of sense in America like the way it does in Ireland in particular. I remember walking through Dublin Airport before the pandemic and seeing ads like, oh, go to Dubai on vacation. I was like, what? Who goes to Dubai on vacation? Like I was almost kind of vaguely aware to what extent it existed. So it's not a place that like Americans visit. And I think it's not a place that many Americans, at least outside of the cryptocurrency industry, spend much time in.
Well, Dubai has always had that kind of seedy underbelly also with crime, especially with the Kinhin gang.
Yeah, I know that where they
famously over there can't leave Dubai because they're on an Interpol watch list.
Kinhin crew had a wedding there, right? This massive meetup of like the most wanted criminals in the entire world just hanging out for like this 10 million euro wedding or something.
Yeah, where you had Russian oligarchs, Middle East terrorists. It was like a James Bond dream. If you'd launched a missile on it that day, it would have taken out all the world's bad guys. But
just be perfect peace and harmony throughout the world forever.
I think Dubai seedy underbelly has been exposed for everybody to see because they've been jailing people, filming attacks. They're incapable of really defending themselves to some extent. They're heavily reliant on Israel and the United States taking out the drones before they hit their cities. It's going to be very hard for the Middle East to walk this back. We are recording this at 6:10 West Cork time. By the time this goes out tomorrow, I found myself listening recently, Vincent, to 2 or 3 podcasts this afternoon as I was going about my business. And they were already out of date 2 days later.
Does one of those podcasts start with Path 2 and end with Power?
No, it doesn't. No, it was actually another podcast I listened to, 2 very smart economists that I admire greatly. So where we are today at the moment, the stock market's down, oil prices are up, and we don't know where we're going, do we, Vince?
Nah, that's exactly what everybody said at the start. This is a problem with these things. You just don't know where they're going to go.
We have a change of direction coming this Tuesday. Something more lighthearted, something more historically interesting maybe than World War III. And if World War III happens in the meantime, thoughts and prayers and all that. We're going to talk about St. Patrick's Day.
Of course we are.
Ireland's national holiday. Are we looking forward to this, Vincent?
I am really looking forward to it. One of the things that we're going to have some fun with is we're going to figure out just how offensive Americans are. And maybe including one of the presenters of this podcast in their St. Patrick's Day celebration. So, yeah, a lot of angles to take, a lot of fun. We might talk about the Taoiseach's visit to the White House and stuff too. But, yeah, it'll be this is going to be a fun one for sure.
It's going to be an Irish-American romp through Irish-American relations.
There you go. Perfect.
And if myself and Vince are not talking at the end of it, we loved doing the podcast up to then. So hopefully you'll tune in and give us a listen. And if you're on Spotify or Apple, and give us a 5-star rating. If you don't, we know where you live and we send the Kinhins after you.
That's true. Yeah.
So I'm Tull from the Irish Politics Newsletter.
And I'm Vince Martin from Wall Street in Maine. Thanks as always.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye now.